God, the sycamore trees.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Season 3 Madness. We will determine the best part of Season 3 of all time according to us. Today's show is sponsored by BlueRoseMag.com, where you can get your copy of Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book, among other Twin Peaks related books like Conversations with Mark Frost by David Bushman, and issues 13 and 14 of Blue Rose Mag. And you should definitely pre-order Laura's Ghost, Women Speak About Twin Peaks by Courtney Stallings, with a very special foreword by Cheryl Lee. So please check out BlueRoseMag.com today. Now, before I introduce today's panel, I would like to recap all the past winners. Lynch Madness went to Lost Highway. Season 1 of Twin Peaks went to episode 2, Zen, or The Skill to Catch a Killer. And Season 2 of Twin Peaks went to episode 22, Beyond Life and Death. And today, we take a new journey into Season 3 Madness. On today's panel, we have one of the coolest cats in the Twin Peaks community. He currently can be heard on his new podcast with his co-host, John Thorne, In Our House Now. And you can also hear him talking about all the shows you should be watching with co-host Scott Ryan on the Red Room podcast. Welcome, Mr. Joshua Minton.
Thank you, gentlemen. Always an honor to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Next on the panel is a fellow Twin Peaks fanatic that needs no introduction because he has been on this madness journey since the very beginning. You can check out his latest videos on Twin Peaks and support him on Patreon at lostinthemovies.com, Mr. Joel Bacco. Joel.
I'm just...
much better. We can hear you.
The headphone was plugged in, so I guess it doesn't work.
Don't worry about the headphones, Joel. But thank you for being on today's show.
We'll make it work.
We'll make it work. You're good. You're fine.
I got one more option.
And finally, the man that brought us all together with this crazy idea of doing a podcast about Twin Peaks that would set up a 5-year run and writing a book together. Get your copy today at BlueRoseMag.com.
Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book.
Yep. My co-host and one of my closest friends, Mr. Ben Durant.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's been much too long since we've done this, so thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And before we get started, I'd like to tell the audience how today's show will work. Each side is organized according to an episode's ratings. Higher rated episodes are matched against lower rated episodes. And you might ask yourself, where did you get the ratings from? Well, that's from IMDb's user rating system. And because this is the first time we'll be doing a video version of this episode, I will have the bracket on the screen for everyone to see, which is something totally new for us, which I'm going to do that right now. Now, gentlemen, we are going to let the madness begin. So
let's do it.
All right, round one, which is going to be going right here. We have part 12, which part 12 is the episode where Diane basically joins the Blue Rose Task Force. We finally see Audrey. It was a big episode, I thought. And then we have part 16, which, as you see, has a 9.6 rating. 16, I think, is the episode Cooper wakes up, where Cooper wakes up from his coma, or being Dougie into a coma, then wakes up. So this was another big episode. Josh, who has not done this yet. Josh, I'm gonna let you go first. What is your choice between part 12 and part 16?
I'm going to go with part 16 on this one. Now, after we all vote, do we talk about why we voted?
Yes.
Should I do that now or do that wait until everyone
Yeah, do that now, yeah. Tell us why 16 over 12?
So 16, in my opinion, has one of the biggest releases of any episode in The Return. And I would just want to say it's really hard to pick my favorite episodes of The Return because I intend and look at it as one thing anymore. So I'm kind of looking at different movements, different emotional movements along this 18-hour journey. And in this episode, Audrey also wakes up. The theme of our recent podcast is all about Audrey. So not only does Diane get the all text message, she runs to confess that Cooper raped her and tries to murder Gordon Cole. And then, Cooper says goodbye to Sonny Jim and Janie E to go off to battle. There is a ton of emotional release inside of this episode, and I just feel like it's very rewarding from an emotional perspective. So that's why I chose that.
I do agree. This is a tough one. All right, we're gonna go to Joel Bacco.
I will also go with part 16. I think, there's a lot of excitement and fascinating developments going on in there. I think for me, the strongest, most interesting part of the episode is the stuff with Diane. The Cooper scene has always struck me as a little odd. I appreciate it in sort of, I think it's a little self-conscious in a way that I kind of like, where he's playing up to the fans' desires to see Cooper finally after 16 episodes.
Yeah.
But it feels a little hollow to me, which apparently it doesn't to other people. Most people seem to just kind of love it straight out. But I don't quite feel like I feel like we're getting a little bit of an ironic hero's return in there for some reason. So that's not necessarily a criticism. I think it's interesting, but just have a little bit of a different response to that one.
Well,
and part 12, I think, it was kind of weak to me. There's some really interesting stuff in there with Sarah. And I do actually like the Audrey scene that is pretty controversial, where she finally comes back with Charlie. But overall, it's not one of the stronger episodes of the series, in my opinion.
Fair enough. All right, so part 16 moves on. But Ben, do you have anything about this or no?
Yeah, real quick. I would have said the same thing. I am the FBI. I do like the whole Cooper waking up and you got the theme music and he's kind of like, Cooper's back and he's ready to go. So yeah, that one's definitely better. And I agree with Joel. I think 12 is actually maybe one of the weaker episodes. And actually, again, the same thing. I like the Audrey stuff in 12 that you kind of say, what's going on with Audrey? And there's this weird kind of thing with her husband. But yeah, it's definitely the stronger episode. I agree. It's part 16.
Well, one thing about 12, I do love the roadhouse scene. That's the one with Trick where he almost gets run off the road. That's in 12. That's actually my favorite roadhouse scene of all that we see.
Which one was the one in 12?
That's the one where Trick almost got run off the road.
Yeah, I like that one too. Now, is part 16 the highest rated of the entire series on IMDb?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep, it is.
Very interesting.
We're going to move on to we're still in round 1. We're going to do part 5, which got an 8.2, up against part 17. Part 5, for a quick reminder, I believe is when Mr. C's in jail. Dougie gets a lot of coffee in the office. He sees a statue. Shelly and Norma bond over Shelly's daughter being with a jackass. Because she's borrowing money, I believe. Not much happened in part 5. Up against part 17. And real quickly, 17, it's the second to last episode. This is like Freddie Sykes gets to beat up Bob with his green glove. A lot of things happen. It's a very exciting episode. We're going to go with Joel first on this one.
Well, I see part 5 is the second lowest rated of the whole series. I'm guessing part 17 is going to trounce it here. I love part 5. To me, part 5 is one of the top 3 episodes of the whole series. I think it's hugely underrated. I think it's where Twin Peaks: The Return comes alive as a TV show, like a weekly TV show for the first time. It's literally the first episode that we got a weekly installment for. The other ones were double headers. And it's got such a rich, open, beautiful spirit. I think the scene where Becky gets into the car and she's on the drugs. She looks up and the music plays. Glorious, one of the most gloriously sort of Mulholland Drive-esque scenes that Lynch has directed since Mulholland Drive. I mean, we hardly see anything like that elsewhere in this episode. I think all the Dougie Cooper stuff is wonderful. I think some of the early chapters of that story where he's kind of gambling in Vegas, they're very fun, but they're very kind of, there's a sort of a dryness to it. And it really warms up and opens up when he goes to work. There's just this whole world that's kind of created there as he kind of wanders around with his green jacket, just visually some of the coolest stuff. And we get that song Windswept for the first time, the Johnny Jewel track where Cooper's touching the shoe of the statue. Probably my favorite ending of any of these episodes. I love that song. I love the whole mood of it that it evokes. I love the scene where Mr. C is on all of the surveillance cameras and they got the stuff blaring and he says, the cow jumped over the moon. We get to see Philip Jeffries, or a box that may be connected to Philip Jeffries in Argentina. This episode, to me, I've been enjoying the series up to this point, but this is where I said, this is just blossoming into all of these fantastic different directions. And I feel like, the scene with Richard, where he's like, comes off like a young Frank Booth and he's just kind of terrifying. Like that's actually, I think, Richard's best scene. After that, he just becomes it all becomes a little too over the top for me. But that one, he's really menacing and threatening, and there's like an edgy kind of excitement to it that I don't think we get elsewhere. So I just think this episode is tremendous. Hopefully I maybe gave somebody a little push for it, but I won't be surprised if it loses right at the outset here.
Wow. So part 5.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Part 5. All right. We're going to go to Ben. Ben, what do you got?
Well, with part 5, what I like is that Dougie goes to work, his whole thing about you're lying, and like there's still the essence of Cooper in there. And the whole Shelley Norma, to be able to see them together, worried about Shelley's daughter, is great scenes. But it's got to be part 17 for me. The idea that everybody's come together at the sheriff's station, and then it moves on to Cooper going into this other world and trying to save Laura, and ending with Julie Cruz's singing and stuff. It's just to me, that's like classic Twin Peaks. So I'm definitely going with part 17.
I love it. So, Josh, you're the tiebreaker.
Joel and I are about to shock the world because
God.
Part 5 is the superior episode by far for all the reasons that Joel laid out there.
Oh my
God!
gosh.
I'm going to throw a few more in there. It's the Mike Nelson scene where he interviews Steven, and this is one of the funniest scenes in the entire show. But and John and I have talked about this. That interaction where Mike had a choice of showing Steven kindness or showing him cruelty. He showed him cruelty. And that sent Steven down a path that helped all the dominoes fall inside of Twin Peaks. So what happens with Richard Horne and Steven in this episode is a soul corruption that essentially collapses the world of Twin Peaks in this entire narrative. So that all starts right here. Jacoby's podcast for the first time.
I forgot about that.
Is golden. That is a beautiful moment. I'm trying to remember some of the other things that I mean, there's so much that happens in this episode. Yeah. The Mitchum brothers, we're introduced to the Mitchum brothers. They beat the crap out of the casino guy, and like these are the people that are after Cooper. How in the world is he going to survive this? So all these dark forces are starting to align, and I guess it's just the kid in me that loved Empire Strikes Back the best. I feel like this is an episode that I could live in over and over and over again.
Wow.
So 5 is my choice. I like 17, but 17 is a lie to me. It's a lie inside the narrative, and I don't like to spend a lot of time inside of a lie. So I guess I run away from that.
That's fascinating.
I thought 17 was going to go get near the end there.
We're already in a controversial start. I love it. I
got to say, I'll say real quick, because I thought I was going to get a chance to talk about it again. I just assumed, so I didn't even mention it. I do like part 17. I think the Bob stuff is ridiculous, but I get a kick out of it. And I think it's I mean, by the time it gets to the directing stage, it's clearly intended to be ridiculous, like just everything about it. So I kind of get that. In a way, it almost feels like it's spoofing some of the stuff in the original series where they resolve Bob a little too neatly. And I love the fact that love the fact that Lynch kind of forced people to grapple with Fire Walk with Me, and for us too, because Frost probably had as much to do with anybody about this decision, but forcing them to grapple with Fire Walk with Me and like rewatch it. And I love how he re-edits it so that now it's black and white, the music is removed, and it's like a whole different experience of the exact same footage. Like I think he used the same takes and everything from the film, just desaturated and without music, and it's kind of fascinating in that regard.
Move on to round 2. This is the meat right here. So part 6, we're gonna go part 6, which got an 8.3 up against part 16, which we already voted on. Part 6, just so everybody at home remembers, this is the episode where I think we first meet Red. We meet Red, and then we barely see him ever again, but he does the magic trick. Truman's wife comes in, nagging him about something. We have the 2 thugs. They get the money from Janie. She pays them off, and she has her big monologue against them. Also, I believe Hawk finds the pages in the doorway of the bathroom in the sheriff's department. So a lot does happen in part 6. So 6 against 16, we're going to start with Ben. Ben.
Wow, you're starting with me. You know, I wrote something before we started this, and now I'm like debating here which one I like better. That's something. I think I like them both a lot. Oh man, I wasn't expecting that I was gonna go first. I should have realized that I was gonna be the first one to go.
You want me to go someone else? You need a minute?
No. I gotta man up and make a decision here. Oh my gosh, wow. You know what? I can't believe I'm gonna do this, but I think I'm gonna go with part 6, and I'm gonna go with part 6. It's the first time we see Diane, which was a great thing to wait 25 years or so to actually get to see Diane. I mean, there's that whole hit and run with the kid, which is emotional and unbelievable. And what else is and I love the whole Janie E. What kind of world do we live in? And that whole like the 1% kind of thing is like, and it's so true to today in our own society. Is like, why can't we treat people better? So I mean, I think for all those reasons, the way the emotion all in one episode, it's a great part. So that's what I'm going with, part 6.
Part 6. All right, we're gonna go to Josh.
So I also respect many parts of part 6, Janie E as well. It is not my favorite episode. I actually find this to be one of the weaker times of the return. So I am going to stick with part 16, but I will say that I do adore the scene with Carl Rod where he, witnesses the ascension of whatever that is, whatever that spirit is out of the kid. I find that to be a comforting scene when I rewatch it, and the rest of the episode is pretty dark. So that is something that's laudable and worth talking about, but I still think part 16 is the stronger.
Wow, I love it. We're tied already, tied again. And Joel Bacco, what do you got for us?
I'm going to tie break in favor of part 16. And I think part 6 is solid. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I think it's a thought-provoking episode, but the previous part 5 to me is much more visceral and exciting. But part 6, some of the parts, the hit and run, I sort of have mixed feelings about. It doesn't totally transport me, but it's interesting, and I think it's a worthy episode. But part 16, also, I think it's an interesting juxtaposition of part 6, where we meet Diane. She turns around as this iconic image. Finally, we get to see Diane Laura Dern. But part 16 takes us so much further, where she's breaking down. We find out she's some sort of tulpa. She's a victim. She's a potential killer. She's a traitor. They're betraying her. There's so many levels of emotional complexity there, and
Great
Laura
point.
Dern just knocks it out of the park.
Very good point.
Nice, love it. All right, we're moving on to part 10, which got an 8.3 rating, up against part 11, which got a 9.1 rating. Part 10. is an amazing episode, I think. You have, I'm going to rattle off some things real quick. Mitchum brothers have a plan. I believe he gets hit in the eye by Candy in this episode. We get a call from the log lady. The woman who sees the hit and run, Richard going speeding, gets beat up because he's afraid she's going to tell the police. Albert goes on a date, and Gordon Cole and I was gonna say Christabel. I can't. Why am I brain farting?
Preston?
Yeah. They kind of watch it from afar. We got the girls. We see Johnny Horn for the first time, but his mom gets beat up by Richard. Up against part 11. Did I say? Yeah, part 11, which I know you guys know probably all this, but this is more for the people listening. Part 11 has one of a very sweet scene with the casino girl woman showing up and seeing Dougie at the restaurant and saying all these wonderful things, and they're giving him pie because the Mitchum brothers get the money. So that's like the big moment in that episode. So we're gonna start off with Joel.
I can pretty easily choose part 11 on this one. I think it's a roller coaster ride of an episode. The first half is just like nonstop thrills and kind of stress and energy. And this is one of the episodes I have the strongest memories of watching the first time, just on the edge of my seat. And I think I was actually watching it with my parents, and my dad made it. My mom left, I think, when the guy's head blew up or something, that was her out. And then my dad made it all the way to the kid getting sick in the car and leaning up and bubbling out all the vomit. And he was like, ah, and he ran out of the room. So it was just such a memorable experience to sit through that. I think part 10 is fine. There's a lot of nice, interesting things about it. I remember really anticipating that one because it was called Laura is the One, and thinking, oh, this is going to be something big is going to happen here. But really, the only thing was that one scene, which I like a lot, where they kind of take her face from Fire Walk with Me and they put it in the door like it's King Kong or something. And Gordon Cole is staring up at it. So other than that, it didn't reveal that much about Laura, or really that much of anything. It was more sort of Richard and the Mitchums and good stuff, but not a standout of episode in the way part 11 is.
Fair enough. All right, Ben, we're going to you next.
So with part 10, you have that whole Candy and the Fly, which was an accident because really an actor got hurt and stuff. And I love that whole Lynch does things because of accidents and goes with it. And you have the whole Johnny and his bear and Richard beating up his grandmother. But I love part 11, and I love part 11 because there's so many slow, great moments with the Mitchum brothers eating cereal, and Dougie delivers the box, and that great moment of the box and what's in the box, and what is it, cherry pie, and then they get to the restaurant and it's just a beautiful moments, and I think yeah, there's just so much to say about this. They took their time in this episode, but there's just these little beautiful moments of the piano playing and Dougie looking up, and I don't know. I would have to go with part 11.
Part 11. All right, so part 11 gets it.
What was Josh gonna do though?
Well, yeah, Josh. Any thoughts about this before we move on?
So it was a full sweep. My choice was going to be part 11 as well. But I do want to say about part 10, this has one of my favorite scenes. I have so many in the return, but this is where Janie E seduces Cooper. I feel, and being a married man, I've been married almost 20 years. It's very rare that my wife looks at me like that and acts like that. So I really appreciated that. No, and it's so sweet. I mean, it's one of the few first moments where this light pours out of Dougie Jones. Cooper is Dougie Jones, and it starts to change the people around him and the world around him. And I adore Margaret's little soliloquy there to Hawk, where she tells him that space, you need to pay attention to the dream. It's going to come flowing out like a river, that which is and is not. And so like, I feel like that's a really important thing for the viewer to hear, that which is and that which is not right then, because what's about to happen, some stuff may be real, some stuff may not be real. Both are equally valuable. Pay attention to what's happening. So that's I think really important as well. The Fire Walk with Me stuff, super important, because I may cause some controversy here, but I don't believe that Fire Walk with Me is a prequel. I think it's a sequel to season 2, and it's the beginning of Cooper's dream that we see culminate in part 18. So when Gordon looks back to the beginning, he's seeing all the way back to the beginning of the dream. At least that's how I interpret it. So that scene is super important to a reading that that I feel like it's the dream theory. Part 11 though, that ending of part 11 with the cherry pie and Santino's where the piano player's playing, and just the release, and it's the first time that Cooper's goodness has truly changed the world around him. 2 people that had a gun at his head, but yet it intervened. Like,
right.
The goodness intervened and changed the world. And I think it's such a strong statement that it's undeniable that is the superior episode. So,
and the casino slot woman who comes by and says that
yes.
Juggy changed her life as well, and that she's reunited with her son, and that's a beautiful moment.
It really is.
All right, so we're moving on. Part 11 moves on, but we're moving on to one of the bigger ones that I'm very excited to do this one. Part 8, which is only an 8.5 for a rated, and up against Part 15, which is an 8.8 rated. Part 8, I don't need to say anything. The bomb happens. Nine Inch Nails performs. We know everything that happens in that episode. 15, for everyone, just in case you forgot, Norma and Big Ed reunite and have a magical moment. Probably one of my favorite moments. You also we see Mark Frost reprise his role as the reporter. We have more Audrey stuff about leaving the house. And Nadu is put in a jail cell for safekeeping. So we're going to start off with Josh for this one.
This is a tough one. It really is. But the contrarian in me is going to come out on this one. And I'm picking part 15 as the superior episode.
Wow.
Because part 15, both episodes are all about release. Okay, so in my mind, it's part 8 has been called by even Mark Frost as a kind of an origination story of some type. I believe it's the corruption of the soul, the soul of the dreamer, whoever you believe the dreamer is. And then part 15, on the other hand, is a series of emotional releases, beginning with, Nadine, Ed, Norma, even poor Walter got released, and I'm sure it's not the way he wanted to. Then we have Janie E. Cooper sticks the fork into the socket after Janie E. feeds him the chocolate cake. The log lady dies. So that's a huge one. And then Audrey and her husband are on the threshold of the house, finally ready to leave. And there's this huge emotional rage that she releases all over him. And then, of course, the final release of the girl who's picked up out of the booth in the roadhouse, thrown to the floor, or set on the floor, and she's crawling and screaming. And that's the last time we see anybody in the roadhouse except for Audrey and that next episode. So I just feel like the emotional satisfaction I get from the releases in episode 15 or part 15 are superior for me than what I got out of part 8, though I love them both.
I can't argue with you at all on that. I totally agree with that. That's a tough one.
Aren't you going to be partial? Because you're not even part of this panel.
I know. I'm just saying. He makes such a compelling argument. How could you argue against that? But Joel, what do you got?
I'll argue against that. I think part 15 has. I agree with a lot of the stuff he said about it. I think you could make a case if you were looking at what contributes the most to the Twin Peaks narrative, etc. You could actually make a compelling case that part 15 contributes more than part 8. But part 8 to me is a masterpiece of filmmaking, and that is the most important, to be honest, as far as what I'm going to rank in this. It's up there with some of the greatest films I've ever seen of all time. It's just a self-contained work of art. I do think it does bring some really interesting elements and juxtapositions to Twin Peaks as a whole, more than almost any other part of the new series. I think maybe with the exception of some stuff in part 18 and 17, and 17 and 18 together, and some of the stuff with Diane maybe in part 16, but and maybe some of the early stuff, but we'll get to that. Part 8 is just a unbelievable piece of television and cinema. I'll never forget watching it for the first time. At the risk of sounding corny, it blew me away. So definitely part 8.
So Ben, you got yourself quite the job here to unbreak this tie.
I do. Gosh. I think part 8 is a masterpiece. It makes me think of Space Odyssey. I mean, it's an awe. It's one of Lynch's finest works for a visual, incredible, amazing. But I would go with part 15.
Oh my God.
Wow!
Because
Wow!
I know. I think
It's
everybody
killing
listening
me.
right now are going to be like, how dare he not go with part 8? But part 15 is like, when I think about Twin Peaks, like this is called Twin Peaks. Like I think about the characters. I think about Ed and Norma. I think about the log lady dying. I think about the characters and Dougie, kind of starting to wake up from watching TV. I think about the characters, and I don't think about the characters when I think about part 8. I mean, I know there are characters. There's the log. I mean, what am I saying? Woodsman.
The Woodsman.
The Woodsman, and there's so many amazing visuals. I mean, to be able to go back in time and see all this, and there's so many incredible. It is a masterpiece. But when I think about the episodes, I think I'd rather be with Ed and Norma and have that moment again with that they love each other, because it's Twin Peaks. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I thought I was gonna. I wrote this before we met here, and I said I'm the only one that's gonna go with part 15. Everybody else is gonna go with part 8. I'm gonna be, I'm just gonna try to shake things up here, but I guess we did, Josh.
We're
did.
clearly in for another Lynch madness now. We're all because this is exactly what happened in that first one.
All
Where
bets are off.
Oh my
Mulholland
God.
Drive and Firewalk with Me got kicked out right away.
Well, Joe, I don't even know where this is going,
Oh my
because
God.
I really thought part 17 was going to go farther. So, I mean, I
This
don't know
is
where
now-
we're
This
going.
is going to be interesting.
This is anyone's game because
That's it. I mean, part 8 was my clear favorite by far.
Yeah,
No
John
competition.
Thorne and others,
None.
I think, would
Zero.
assume that'd be part 8. I think most people would be like, "Oh, why don't you even listen to this? It's got to be part 8."
when
Well,
I
in some ways, you almost have to pull part 8 out. It is so.
I know. I think
distinct.
I believe your rationale. It makes sense, but I think also a little part of you maybe wanted to make this a little more
100%,
interesting.
That's a tough choice.
A little bit.
Little retreat of Lost Highway.
All right,
Yeah.
we're moving on. We got part 13, which got an 8.5. That is a great episode. You have Jacoby and Nadine kind of showing their feelings for each other. We also have more of the Audrey and Charlie leaving the house. I can't think of his name.
The arm wrestling.
Yeah. The big arm wrestling scene. That's the big one. Yes, the big arm wrestling scene. Up against part 2, which got an 8.8. In part 2, I'm sure everybody. I mean, this is James's really cool moment at the end. A lot of things happen in this one. I think everybody knows what happens in part 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I have to go into that. We're gonna start with Joel on this one.
This actually is a little challenging. I will go with what my original decision was going to be, which is part 2. I think all of the stuff with the Red Room is just fascinating. I love the introduction of the evolution of the arm. The scene with Mr. C and Daria is really disturbing and well done. Trying to think what else is in part 2. Those are the things that really stick out to me. I mean, part 1 and 2 sometimes tend to get a little conflated in my mind because we watched them together, and I think when I first watched it, I didn't even know where one ended and the other began because it was seamless. They didn't have a credit sequence. But I think of part 1 and part 2, I'd probably give part 2 the edge. Not that we're putting those two up against each other yet, but
Yeah.
part 2, I would go. Part 13, I really like the atmosphere of it. That beautiful shot at the end with Ed watching the traffic go by outside of his gas station. Very Edward Hopper-esque.
Don't forget about James singing "Just You" at the Roadhouse.
Right. Yeah, of course. Who could forget that? It's a very night-heavy episode as I remember it in my mind. Although you have all this stuff with Dougie almost getting poisoned and all that in Vegas too. But yeah, I just think of it. I think of the end of the episode a lot when I think of that one, and it's strong. But part 2 would be my pick for that.
All right, part 2. Ben, what do you got?
Well, I agree with him. Part 2. I mean, for me, it's the Cooper and Laura exchange. I mean, we've waited 25 years for them to meet up again, and Laura shows her light face, and yeah, I guess, I mean, for me, that holds a lot. I mean, I just always wanted to see them come together again. You know, Cooper's maybe been in the Red Room for 25 years, and now Laura's here again to, kind of say he's time, he can go, he can leave now. So to me, I know that's only, that's probably a scene or only a moment, but it sticks in my head, and I just have to go with that one, I think.
And Josh, any thoughts on this?
So I would have picked actually part 13 would have been my choice, though I do love part 2 for many reasons. I think it is one of the strongest finishes from a Roadhouse perspective. The chromatics playing Shadow at the end of that episode. I remember when I first watched that live on TV, I was like, oh, this is going to be Twin Peaks now. Like I felt like that music just drove it home, and it didn't have a lot of music in it except for American Girl that had played earlier on in the episode. And I still don't find that song very rewarding or pleasant to listen to. So the chromatics was a great moment. But part 13 for me, I just feel like that the Audrey stuff at the end about the existentialism, it's like Ghostwood in here. That's when Anthony Sinclair tries to kill Cooper in that episode. And yet again, his goodness reaches out, and it's a perceived mercy that happens in there when Cooper comes up to brush the light speckles off of Sinclair's shoulders, or whatever it is that draws Cooper to the man's shoulders. That motion, it's a perceived mercy that changed Anthony Sinclair's heart. And I love those moments in the return. And come on, the arm wrestling scene, dude, there are very few moments of brutality that are so funny. The idea that this band of, scoundrels would choose their leader on the basis of who is the best arm wrestler in the room said everything about what was about to happen to America after 2017. I mean, I feel like we're basically living in the world where the best arm wrestler wins. So
awesome.
So can I change my answer if I want to?
No, part 2 moves on.
What if Josh convinced me? We also say in part 13 that Dr. Amp or Jacoby and Nadine have a moment at the store, and it's a beautiful thing where I think he just sees her shovel at the window, and they come out. And
I'll give this up to you, Ben. What are you going to change your mind? I'll give it to you if you want to.
I mean, have we ever done that before in these madnesses? Have we ever changed it?
No,
I think it's a courtroom now.
Wow.
I will allow it.
Here's the question. Yeah, I was going to say, the question is, can the person who wants to change it be the judge of it? Or should Bryon be the judge?
I will allow a change since this is our last madness. But Ben, it's up to you. If you want to change it.
I don't know. There are some. I mean, when I think about 13, there are so many great moments. The conga line is funny. The wrestling is very intense, going back and forth. And then you have, you have the Dougie coffee shop scene, and
Shelley says goodbye to Becky for the last time.
Does she? Wow, I forgot that.
Ben. Here, I'll give it to you. 3, we got to move on. 1, 2.
I'm going to change it.
You're changing it to part 13?
Shock the world!
I know. We got to mix this thing up.
All right.
I love the whole Cooper and Laura scene, but if that's the only thing I care about, and the rest of the episode didn't mean anything to me, I feel like I should go with the one that has more emotion for me. So
13 gets it. We're moving on. We're still around 2. We have Part 14, which has got a 9.1 up against Part 5. Part 5 I already went through, but Part 14 does have a lot of amazing moments, and I think I say that about every part, but they all kind of do. This one, Andy gets a visit by the giant, and basically gets visions of what could possibly happen and what he should do. Jack Rabbit's palace comes into place. Gordon Cole tells us about his dream, which is very cool. And Diane gets shot and turns into an orb, or goes back to the Red Room, I should say. So a lot does happen in 14.
No, wait, that's 16.
That's 16.
Oh, that's 16. Oh, you know what? You're right. 14, we learn about the Blue Rose.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's part 12, I think.
No, 14.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes, yes.
We
Okay,
learn
sorry.
about the story
Tammy
about
and Albert.
Gotcha.
So I think I got those two scenes confused.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me. Josh, we're gonna go with you first.
This is a tough one. I just laid out a pretty good argument for part 5, but I'm going to go with part 14 on this one. I feel like we also forgot Lissy is the Roadhouse performance, and I think that is the best song that came out of the return.
Oh,
Wild Wild West, like I still play that song in my car when I drive. That song is on fire. But the Gordon Cole section on Who is the Dreamer, I think that basically tells you how to think about the return. Like, I feel like that's where Lynch basically made it easy and said, okay, this is how you think about it. Wrap that as a frame around what you're looking at. And then the Jack Rabbit's Palace stuff, I love that scene. Everything that Andy saw, including, by the way, the phone pole outside of Carrie Page's house, is extremely important because it tells you that what happens in part 18 is part of the plan. Like, he tells Andy as a character, this is all part of the plan, and here's your part in it. Make sure you go do it. Same thing we find out he does with Freddie and the green glove of power. And then, of course, Sarah Palmer murders that man in the Elks Bar in the same episode. I feel like it's just a strong episode from the very beginning to the very end, and it's got some of my favorite scenes. So
awesome. So 14 goes to Josh. Ben, what do you got for us?
I would agree with part 14. I mean, Sarah at the bar, Jack Rabbit's Palace with all the police officers, Cole's dream. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in there.
All right. So part 14, we'll move on. But before we do that, Joel, do you have anything to say?
I would probably stick with part 5, just for all the reasons I said before. But I like part 14 a lot. And if an episode is going to be part 5, that's one of the ones that I'd be most okay with doing. Yeah, I love all the dreamy stuff, and it feels like the beginning of the climax in some way. Like, we've had a long period of episodes after part 8 where not as some stuff happened, but it was sort of a more low-key phase of Twin Peaks, and with this one things start to kick up and get kind of exciting towards the end.
Cool. All right. So part 14 moves on. We're going to have part 3, 8.5 rating, up against one of the bigger ones, part 18, with an 8.8. 18, we know what happens there. Everybody should know what happens there.
Do we know what happens there?
Well, we don't know. We don't know, but we know what happened. What we saw on the screen, we know, but we don't know what happened. But part 3, just a quick recap. Dougie comes out into the real world, or Cooper comes out into the real world as Dougie. The casino scene happens. We also have, I think that's the big scene.
The Purple Mansion stuff. With Dougie coming out.
Yep, the purple world there. It's all about the bunnies. We're going back to the old case file. Kimmy ate one of the bunnies when she was pregnant because she had gas. Big moments that really perpetuate the story forward. We're going to start with Ben on this one.
It's interesting because I like both of them so much. Both of them have very Lynchian, strange world kind of a feel to it. Yeah, I mean, there's things I like about part 18 where it's very, Lost Highway is my favorite David Lynch film, and there's a whole feel of Lost Highway where Carrie and Cooper are kind of going down the road, and maybe somebody's following them, maybe not. But I find myself going to part 3. I mean, I love the whole Cooper in the purple world, and it's like he's going forward and then he's going backwards, and it's almost like in between our world and the Red Room, it seems like to me. And just that whole strange feeling of, Major Briggs' head in the sky, and it's just wonderful. And I find Dougie has grown on me a lot too. So to have Dougie all of a sudden be in this, and he can't tie his own shoes, and he happens to just duck right when they're going to try and shoot him, and I don't know, it's kind of grown on me. So I guess I really lean towards part 3.
Wow, I did not. I expected 18 to take it. We're going to go to Josh.
This was a tough one because I too love part 3. It's my favorite of the first 4 parts. And I have loved Dougie Jones for quite a while now. I actually bought one of those stand-ups from Showtime because I wanted to have one before they ran out of them. But I adore the Dougie Jones parts. Also, in part 3, Mr. Jackpots is born. I don't know if we talked about the casino, experience of
Right.
Cooper walking in and just starting to play this game of call for help. Who's going to come to my aid when I call for help and I can't explain what I need? And it starts to happen. It's an exciting episode, but I'm going to go with part 18. I feel like part 18 is, one of the most emotional and tense episodes of any of them there. And it's like stretched out, it was awful watching that episode live when it was on. It was just the tension in the last 10 minutes of that episode is some of the worst that I think I've ever experienced watching a television show since the end of The Sopranos, probably. Maybe Breaking Bad got close. Twin Peaks blew them all away. And I'll always love part 18.
All right, I love it. Another great tie. Joel, what do you got for us?
I'll break it in favor of part 18. I think part 3, if it was somehow just the Purple World stuff, might actually sneak past. After that point, I love all the Dougie Jones stuff. I think Jade is great. She's really plays like a great kind of straight woman to the Dougie character. But the real thrill of that episode is in the beginning, the first 15, 20 minutes. That's up there with anything Lynch created with his digital shorts like Rabbits or Darkened Room. I just absolutely love that stuff. But overall, part 18, we'll have more opportunity to talk about, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
All right, part 18 moves on. All right, the last part of round 2, the last seed, if you will. We have part 9, which got an 8.5 rating, up against part 7, an 8.8. 9. A pivotal moment is when now I had it.
Is this part 9 you're talking, or part 7?
Yeah, part 9. I would say the most pivotal is Jerry. His foot talks to him. Oh, Major Mrs. Briggs.
The chair.
The chair. One of the biggest. Yeah, big pivotal moment in that one. And then part 7 is Diane comes face to face with Mr. C and says to Gordon Cole, there's something wrong here. This is not him. This is not who, this person did something horrific to me, and there's something going on here. And that was very emotional, I thought. So we're going to start off with Joel.
This is a pretty easy one for me. I would say part 7 is it's the first episode of the series that really big time kind of leads back to the original series in a lot of ways, where they're looking, or the film, where they're looking at Annie's writing in the diary. Ben is talking to, he has that great scene with Beverly where they're walking around and you almost wonder, is that Josie in the walls or something, where they're hearing the noise. And he says something to her. Yeah, he says something to her about Laura, and he's looking at the old Great Northern Key. And there's some other stuff in that episode too that now is slipping my mind. They find Major Briggs's body and all of that, but it's got so many parts to it that are kind of calling back to the old series and bringing all of Twin Peaks together to the point where it feels like a very conscious, like they shaped it that way. Part 9 to me is, I do love all the Briggs stuff. There's a kind of a nice mellow feel to it, but we're talking here about the build up and the come down from part 8. And I like the build up more than the come down from it.
All right, nice. So one for part 7. Ben, what do you got?
I will go with part 9. And I'll go part 9 because I love the Andy Lucy discussing red or beige chair. I like the whole Briggs chair. This is the only time we see Mrs. Briggs, and to have that moment to have with her and tell, basically kind of fulfilling from season 2, where Major Briggs tells Bobby that you're going to be a great man someday, and here it is. It's like Mrs. Briggs is saying you weren't ready for this yet, but here you are ready now. So that I thought that was a great moment. Matthew Lillard's performance about he just wanted to go scuba diving. I thought that was a great performance. I loved it and stuff. So and then Cole and Diane smoking. I think that's ad-libbed. I love those moments where nobody's talking and there's tension between Tammy and Diane, and then Cole just wants a cigarette and stuff. So I don't know. Those are all great moments for me. So I'll go with part 9.
I love it. Josh, tiebreaker. What do you got?
So I'm going to tell you what I love about part 7 before I tell you my answer, which is going to be part 9. I love the Ike the Spike scene. I love that that's where Cooper actually acts for one of the first times besides just drawing on the page, and that I feel like that's a nice release. It's a nice milestone in what happens there. You've got that great scene of the sweeping in the roadhouse that went on for a little over 2 minutes and pissed a ton of TV critics off. I always love it when TV critics get pissed off. That's something that makes me very interested. But the emotional release, and again, I keep going back to this, I seek out these emotional releases when I watch the return of Betty Briggs and what she tells Bobby, and how that echoes the scene from Major Briggs and Bobby in I think it's season 2. I could be wrong about that. But it's so important, and there are so few lights inside of the Twin Peaks storyline. It's mostly dark. It's a really dark area of the narrative, what happens in Twin Peaks. So these little moments where these characters can come together and find some kind of kindness, I find them to be extremely valuable. Jerry Horn fighting his foot, man, that's also one of the funniest scenes in the episode. I feel like there's another one that I'm missing. The Fusco brothers, I'm going to leave it at that. I feel like that the chair scene with the Briggs family was the winner, the reason why that won for me.
So part 9 moves on. Love it. All right. The last seed of round.
Oh, wait, one thing before we move on. Just a little interesting note. Those are, I believe, the only 2 scenes where Ben Horn and his assistant Beverly Page are looking for the source of that ringing sound. Right?
Yes,
so it's part 7 and part 9 where they're looking for that ringing hum, and they both kind of surround part 8. So it's almost like the reverberations of what happened in part 8 are bleeding into the 2 episodes.
I never thought about that. That is really something.
All right. That's pretty cool. We're learning new things as we're going along here. Part 4, which got an 8.6 up against part 1 and 8.7. Part 4, we get to see David Duchovny comes back as I'm having
Denise Bryson.
We have the blue scene between Gordon Cole.
Doesn't get any bluer.
Albert doesn't get any bluer. Very famous scene there. Lucy discovers what cell phones are. And a lot more things will happen, which you guys will discuss. Up against part 1, we're going to start off with Ben.
Ben, huh?
Ben.
Hello! Yeah. I mean, 1 does kind of get meshed up together with 2 in some ways. It is hard sometimes to separate it because it does. I think Joel said it kind of, in the original one, it kind of just keeps going. And I have to go with part 4. I love the whole Dougie saying hello, and then you meet Denise Bryson again after all these years, and you should fix your heart. You get the Wally Brando scene, which I think is a fun little scene. Dougie doing his thumbs up with his son, Sonny Jim, and that it's kind of comical too. I love when he goes to breakfast and he doesn't know what to do, and Sonny Jim is helping him with breakfast. And then what else? I guess, Albert and Agent Preston and Cole confront Mr. C for the first time. And, so there's just so many great moments. So I'd have to go with part 4.
All right, nice. Joel, what do you got for us?
I would go with part 1. I think part 4 is a lot of fun, and I enjoy the Dougie, the Wally Brando, and all of that. I like the scenes in the sheriff's station kind of warming us back up to the town again. But part 1, I really think it's bold and fascinating how they take us back into Twin Peaks without really taking us into Twin Peaks. We have a few scenes set in the town, but the bulk of that episode is Buckhorn in New York. And the New York stuff is just really vivid and very, very memorable. That to me is their strongest kind of hook in relaunching The Return. I think if it weren't for those scenes, the whole thing would feel a little too scattered and mushy, like where are we going with this for several episodes. But that gives it this tight opening that everyone can latch onto right away. And of course, it echoes the viewer themselves sitting there watching the screen, waiting for something to happen. So I think on the strength of those scenes primarily, but also just the kind of general interest in telling a story that isn't really much set in Twin Peaks. And it feels a lot like almost like he's doing another Mulholland Drive pilot where we're meeting all these characters in distant places from one another and not sure how it's going to all tie together yet.
I love this. This is like a game full of ties. Josh, break this tie for us. What do you got?
This is a really tough one. I agree with everything both of you just said about each of these episodes. The glass box scene in part 1. Man, is there anything better in a first episode of a show? I don't know. But I'm gonna go with part 4. And the reason why, it's a very simple episode, all things considered. Very few things really happen that are super dramatic. I love the entire experience of Cooper getting out of the casino, getting home, finally arriving home, and his wife just slaps the shit out of him. I think that is so funny. Remember, Lucy gets scared by the cell phone as well. Bobby Briggs, that reaction he has as he sees Laura's photo on the table is a huge emotional rush that we all experience from a nostalgia perspective. It was a great injection of nostalgia at the right moment where we're all thinking like, what happened to our Twin Peaks? What is this that we're watching? This is not Twin Peaks. And then it has a nice little injection in there. I feel like the stuff in the prison speaks for itself, although I will point out it's really cool that the Mr. C speaks in the same low monotone voice that that Cooper speaks in part 17 when he's narrating over it, which is kind of an interesting callback. But I just feel like from a satisfaction perspective, again, that's the only way I can judge these. I'm going to go with part 4. I really truly love that episode.
Now, Josh, have you picked the winner in every bracket so far?
I think I have, actually.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
And we're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, Blue Rose Magazine, your one-stop shop for all things Twin Peaks. As you can see right now, you can get yourself issues 14 and 15 of the Blue Rose Magazine for only $17.99. Fantastic deal. Also, a big one, our book, Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book with Mark Frost, Conversations with Mark Frost, for only $49.98 2-pack. That's a great deal. Also, you can get yourself some back issues of Blue Rose Magazine. You can pre-order Laura's Ghost, which is on sale right now for $24.99 from $29.99. You can buy Conversations with Mark Frost separately if you'd like. If you already own our book or you already own Mark Frost, you can get our book. You can do that. The 30th anniversary edition, $9.99. Blue Rose Magazine, fantastic issue. Well worth. It's a great keepsake. A must buy. Also, The Woman of Lynch. We've had those ladies on the podcast. It's a fantastic book. If you do not have it, you got to get it. But you can get that and everything else. TwinPeaksMag.com. You're supporting a local publisher, Scott Ryan, and you're supporting all the writers and authors that have graced these pages. So support them at BlueRoseMag.com. We're going to throw to commercial, and we'll be back with round 3 of Season 3 Madness. Are you having a hard time finding a good book to read about Twin Peaks? Did you finish binge watching Twin Peaks in quarantine and now you're looking for more? If so, we have the book for you. Twin Peaks Unwrapped, the book. Based off the popular show from the 1990s, read about the making of each episode from over 100 cast and crew members. This book covers Season 1, Season 2, Fire Walk with Me, and Season 3. But wait, there's more! This book has commentary from the community and the hosts from the wildly popular podcast Twin Peaks Unwrapped. Order now. Supplies are very limited. Only $25.99 plus shipping and handling. Go to bluerosemag.com today. So we're going to round 3, part 16 up against part 11. Ben, we're going to start you off.
I guess. So we back to part 11 with the vortex for Cole and
The map.
the Hawks map and the Mitchum brothers having cereal that I liked. And then 16 where Mr. C and Richard are at the Rock and Richard gets electrocuted. And then we have the FBI. I am the FBI Cooper. This is tough. This is really tough. I'm sorry. I'll get an answer here. 16 or 11 here. You know what? I think I'm still going with 11 because I just love the whole Dougie delivering the box to the Mitchum brothers and that whole thing. It gets me more. Even though I love Cooper waking up in the whole FBI stuff, I think it's got to go to a part 11.
All right, part 11. And Joel, what do you got?
I'm going to go with part 11 as well, actually. I think part 16 is obviously more important to the narrative overall. It's got some of the bigger moments. But part 11 is just a beautifully structured episode. And honestly, that is decisive for me. I love how the first half is all of these escalating tension scenes, one after the other after the other. And then boom, halfway through it breaks, it goes to Vegas, and I'm pretty sure it never comes back. It spends the whole second half in Vegas telling that one story. And I love that juxtaposition of the buildup of tension and then this kind of relaxing. They even got that song, that version of Leaving Las Vegas playing as he's kind of coasting down the strip. And even though he's maybe about to be shot, it's not nearly as tense as anything in the first half. And I just think with the editing of the series, sometimes he finds kind of awkward assemblies of scenes, and sometimes they just lock together and create this little unit that works so beautifully. So for me, it's definitely part 11 as a standalone episode.
Cool. So part 11 does move on, but Josh, you got anything to say before we move on?
I've been defeated in my bracket now. I would have picked 16, but I'm totally fine with 11 winning. Hey, that Bobby Briggs scene where he runs out into the road and the girl's throwing up, I feel like that is another one of those meta scenes through which you can view the whole show and be like, okay, there's elements of there in that entire experience that you can apply to multiple different places in the return. It's a very, very important episode, and I'm okay to lose out on that one.
I hope you realize what a special person you have dining with you. He saved my life.
All right, so part 11 moves on. We have part 15 up against part 13, and Joel, we're going to start with you.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to choose part 13. I think I almost want to make my comments after I see what other people pick, but because I have a couple things to say that.
Okay.
Let's do that then.
Yeah, you're
I
more.
I don't want them to shape other people's opinions.
All right, so that's fine. We'll stick with you're putting it down for 13.
Yeah, I'll share my reasons after.
Okay, Josh, what do you got?
I'm going with part 15 on this one. So, Ben, you're going to have to break the tie before we talk about why.
Neither one of you guys are going to help me to make this decision.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
You
man.
gotta do it on your own.
They put Ben in it. pickle.
This
They
is a
put you in
tough one.
pickle.
This is a really hard one because there's
It
a lot
is.
of great things going on in part 13. And part 13 was the one that I got persuaded to change my. Was that right? I changed my
Yeah.
vote at the last second.
Remember all the release conversation?
Mhm.
Remember all those great arguments?
Oh yeah, all those great moments. That was 15, or is it
15.
Yeah, 15. That's what it was. So, yeah, Ed and Norma and Mr. C and Agent Jeffries meeting up, and Richard and Dougie getting electrocuted, and the log lady dies. This is really hard. This is really, really hard. I have to make a decision because there's
It's
nobody
tough.
else here now. This is
Yeah,
gonna be,
This is you, man. You're deciding.
Oh, Ben.
I actually forgot what Joel and Josh said.
So I voted for part 15. Joel voted for part 13.
I actually think I'm gonna go with part 13. Surprisingly, I think.
All right, Ben, going 13.
This is tough.
It's a tough one.
Locking
It's a tough
13 in.
Am I locking it in?
Lock in, look.
Can we skip this and grab a bracket?
All right,
You know,
so
you can still watch them both.
together.
Though.
That's
Yeah.
true. All right.
all right,
part
so
13.
So part 13 is going on.
Yep.
yeah, so
Okay.
Joel, what do you want to talk about now?
So I was going to say two things, one of which is kind of petty and the other one of which is very controversial. So I'll say the petty one first. I have to punish part 15 for beating part 8. That's just a fact. So that's the petty part that I can't
Yes.
justify. And then the honest part that's kind of controversial is the Ed and Norma scene. It's grown on me somewhat. It did not blow me away the first time I saw it, and it's never really totally worked for me the way it works for others. I don't know why. I want it to work for me, but it doesn't quite shake me up. I maybe it's a tragic view of life or something, but that scene with Ed at the end where he's watching Norma talk to Walter, and then we see him alone at the end sitting in his gas station, to me is much more poignant than the kind of swelling music and them coming together and all of that. So that's just my kind of personal take on that juxtaposition where for whatever reason, I love that ending of part 13 and that image. And to me, that lingers longer in some ways than, love Otis Redding too, but I don't know.
That's totally fine. Anybody else want to say anything about these episodes before we move on, or?
No, because I lost.
All right.
I know I'm still like debating whether I picked the right choice.
You picked the right choice.
It is.
You picked it.
Picked it from the heart.
Starting positions.
Stop playing around, boss.
We got part 14 up against part 18. Don't really need to tell you. We all know what happened in those parts. Josh, we're going with you first.
Part 18 with a bullet still for me. I'm gonna
Part
note that
18.
now. That was a tough one, but it is what it is.
All right, and then Ben.
These are getting tough.
I know.
Part 18, I think. I mean, it's true Lynch. It's true the road trip, and I think a lot of what Josh had said. There was that you're watching the clock as you know that you're running out of time for that episode, and I do remember it was like I don't know if it was like 10 minutes left or what, but it's like you're still driving. Where are you going? How are we gonna wrap up everything in 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And I should realize we're probably not gonna wrap things up really, but it's true Lynch and that whole sense of tension and that feeling and I don't know. Yeah, I go with that. Part 18.
Part 18 moves on, but Joel, do you have anything to say about these two episodes?
So yeah, I same thing. It's just it's masterful direction. It's where you feel the series become a Lynch movie in a lot of ways for the first time. Like I know Frost played some role in all of that, but the Lynch sensibility of like late Lynch storytelling really takes over in this episode, and I dig it. But I do love part 14. In some ways, it's the more like you could settle in and watch part 14 and probably have more fun in a way than part 18. But part 18 is just there's something hypnotic and fascinating about it.
I don't think there's anything fun in part 18 that I would say, oh, that's fun to watch. It's great.
Boiling,
That's great.
burning up the guns in the
Yeah, that's still weird. That's weird.
I was at the beginning of part 18. I do love that Dougie goes home, or Dougie 2.0.
Oh yeah, that's the one moment.
Very sweet moment.
Dougie
The one
2.0.
happy moment. It's all downhill from there.
It really is.
Yes.
FBI. I'm Special Agent Dale Cooper.
So part 18 moves on. We have part 9 up against part 4. Ben, I'm putting you on the spot. You're going first on this one.
So we've got 4 with the Dougie saying hello, and Fix Your Heart with Denise, and then you said we have part 9, right? So
right.
we have
Right.
This is the chair.
This is the chair.
Chair.
It's a tough one.
I have more writing on part 4, and I feel like there's more scenes that I liked, whether it be Dougie and his son Thumbs Up, and he doesn't get any bluer and confronting Mr. C. So I feel like there's more moments that I love about part 4. So I guess I'll go with part 4.
Part 4 for Ben. Nice. All right, Joel, what do you got for us?
This was one I didn't think about much because I didn't pick either of these ones for their first bracket. I think actually, a little bit to my surprise, I would probably go with part 9. I think when you kind of remove it from its maybe a little bit of a letdown after part 8, there's just a nice kind of mood throughout it. The Bobby stuff kind of holds it together, all the chair stuff with Major Briggs, and just kind of feels like you're letting out a deep breath after part 8. Part 4, I enjoy a lot of the moments. It doesn't, I don't have any kind of objective criticisms of part 4, but I don't know if drags is the right word, but a lot of the Dougie stuff to me is more fun in a way once he goes on, he's interacting with more. Like this is kind of setting up Dougie, and there's that long sequence where he's sitting in the office with the casino owner and stuff, and it's funny and it works, but makes me a little restless too, I think. So part 9.
Part 9, another tie.
And also that's the foot one, right? Where the foot talks to Joey. That's hilarious. So yeah.
So Josh, break this tie.
Wow, this is a tough one because I do love part 9 quite a bit, but I'm going with part 4. So we're gonna push that ahead for all the reasons I said before. It's one of my favorite of the first 4 episodes.
What's all this about?
Message from Margaret Lancerman to Hawk concerning Agent Cooper.
All right, we're getting very close, gentlemen. Very close to the end here. We're gonna now nominate the final 2 episodes. So it's gonna get harder, Ben. It's gonna get harder. Part 11 up against part 13. Now it's weird. Part 11 came from the beginning, and part 13, they both made it through pretty close. You guys were pretty much on the page for 11 and 13. Yeah, 11 you guys all voted for, and 13 it was some of you weren't for it. So this is going to be interesting. We're going to start off with Josh.
Okay, so I'm going to vote for part 11 on this one. I feel like that pie scene at the end completely elevates this to a different place than almost any other episode. So I do love part 13. It's got some great stuff in it, especially the Audrey scene. It's actually one of my favorites of her scenes. But I'm going to go with part 11 just for the emotional response that I have from it still when I watch it.
All right, part 11. And Joel, what do you got?
What's the Audrey scene in part 13?
So that's where it's the existential scene where it's the little girl down the lane statement. It's like Ghostwood in here, and she starts to question. Like she sits down for the first time. She's
not at the door yet, though.
No,
that's part 15. Okay,
correct. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I would go with part 11. And again, it has to do with the structure, the overall shape, because part 11 I can remember as an entire episode. I could almost tell you every scene that comes after the other. Part 13, it's a little more vague. It blurs into other episodes and stuff. There's parts of it I think are very strong, but it just doesn't stand out to me as a distinct unit the way that Part 11 does.
Another piece of pie for our friend.
Part 18 up against Part 4. We're going to start with Joel.
And no competition for me here. I don't think Part 4 is that strong of an episode compared to Part 18, which kind of carries the whole. I mean, in a way it carries it. In a way it almost makes it into something totally new. No pun intended, Carrie Page. I just realized. But yeah, and I mean, I guess we haven't talked much about Carrie either, but that's just such an interesting development to bring Laura and Cheryl Lee back in that persona. The only thing that kind of makes it hard for me to judge Part 18 is probably like at least one or two of you. I knew the ending. So I never had that sense of shock
Palmer House
that many people have had watching it of like, oh my God, what's happening? I'm so disoriented. This is like, I knew that was coming the whole time and I thought it would come earlier. So when it was the last 10 minutes of the show, I was like, oh, I guess I know how the show ends then. It's still a very strong scene conceptually and I like it, but unfortunately I was a little bit robbed, I guess by myself for looking at the spoiler, but I was a little bit robbed of the full shock of it.
All right, so 18. Ben, we're going to you.
It's got to be Part 18. Same thing. I mean, yeah. I remember it was like, where's Laura Palmer? Like I was hoping that Cheryl Lee would be in this more, but I think it's more satisfying that we have to wait till the end. And then it's not even really Laura Palmer or another version of her. So I think that, yeah, it's just a powerful part. I'd have to stick with Part 18.
All right.
It would have been another sweet. I would have picked Part 18 as well.
So Cheryl Lee after Part 2, the only times we see her are the portrait. I mean, obviously the beginning of each episode, but the portrait with the two angels around it and Andy's vision and her appearing in the doorway to Gordon Cole. Is that it?
She's in 17 too. Like
of course, yeah, Firewalk with the Firewalk.
And Part 8 in the bubble.
Right, okay, yes. Okay, so they
somewhat
somewhat consistently sprinkle her throughout. Okay.
Is Sarah Palmer here?
Who?
Sarah Palmer.
No, there's no one here by that name.
All right, so we've made it to the last round. We have Part 11 up against Part 18. I did not see this happening. I actually thought Part 8 would have made it all the way.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it would be Part 8 versus 18.
Yeah, me too. That's really what I thought it was going to be. But I love this. This is something we did not foresee happening, which is great. Makes it interesting. Ben, we're going to start off with you.
Wow, I had to give you the final. I have to start with me. I mean, I have a feeling we're all going to say the same thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Part 18, I mean, I think it's funny because part of me is like, well, there's so much not Twin Peaks. Most of the cast isn't even there, but there's something special about Cooper going down that road with Carrie and, trying to go on maybe a new adventure. And we didn't talk much about Diane and him going to that hotel and then him coming out and it's a whole other hotel and she's gone. And is he Richard now? I mean, to me, his true Twin Peaks is that it keeps the mystery alive. You don't know what's going to happen next. So I got to stick with Part 18.
All right, 18. Joel, what do you got?
I have to be the one to decide if I'm gonna. Well, I guess not necessarily.
Josh, could be a tiebreaker. I don't know.
I mean, I want to make it fun till the end, and I feel like Josh could surprise us. But I just, to be honest, and I love Part 11. It's a top 5 episode for me. I think 14, 11, 5, 8, and 18 are my top 5 episodes. But it's got to be Part 18.
All right.
And we haven't talked at all about the Diane stuff either. I think, obviously, that sex scene with her is super disturbing. And it's, I think, and I haven't wrapped my head around a lot of the stuff in Part 18 yet, 3 years later. A lot of the stuff with like the Richard and Linda idea, and this idea that are they summoning Judy? Like, what does Judy have to do with all this? The Judy Diner and all that. There's so much more to pick apart here. I think even just judging it as a piece of filmmaking or drama, it's very effective in a totally different way than Part 8, like almost opposite. They're kind of like two different visions of digital cinema. Part 8 using digital to kind of create all these worlds, and then Part 18 almost using digital to strip it down. You know, and I find that really fascinating, and there's just so much going on there. So yeah, it is Part 18, but Part 11 is worthy of making it. You know,
So,
not over Part 8 in my opinion, but it's certainly worthy of getting to some sort of last contention.
What year is this?
So Part 18 wins it, but Josh, before we announce it the winner, what was your thought about these two?
It would have been a clean sweep. I think Part 18 is definitely the superior experience. I feel like it's the moment where they just the last second, they just pull the rug right out from under you all over again. And earlier I referred to what happened in Part 17 as a lie. And it just because it's a lie doesn't mean it's not valuable. But when you start playing around with memories and, calling fake news on things that happened in the past, trying to change the structure of what we know to be true, that has enormous repercussions. And in Cooper's story, we see the stripping away of all of these masks that he's put on himself, to the point where he even sets his love of friends and family on a shelf when he says goodbye to Janie E. and the Mitchum brothers finally, and Gordon Cole even, to the point where he has to shed that final layer of true love and devotion that he has with Diane to truly complete a mission that, if we think about it at its core essence, he is taking a murdered girl who has now survived home to her incestual rape house. And that, to me, is like, that when you consider it, like, that is the least safe place that Laura Palmer could have been taken the day after she was supposedly murdered. What would Leland's response have been had he seen his daughter alive the day after he supposedly murdered her in a train car? It was the most dangerous place that he could have taken Laura Palmer. So the mission in and of itself was doomed to fail from the beginning. And so the idea that at the very end he would be even stripped of the mission, and what he has one question left for the universe and everything inside of it, and that is, what the hell year is it? Like, what am I even doing here? This is crazy. Who are you? It's not even Laura Palmer, right? So everything's been stripped away from him, and that fade to black in the end is just so devastating. You can read whatever you want into it. I have my own interpretations. I'm sure you all do as well. And it doesn't matter. They're all equally valuable and equally valid. But to accomplish that with cinema on television is it's a work of art. I mean, it's still a work of art, and we can all go back and rewatch it over and over and over again and have the same, similar, or even a different experience. So Part 18 is very special to me.
And Josh, I never thought it was 1989, and now that you say that, I guess it could be. So you're saying it was right after Laura Palmer died that Cooper was bringing her back to the house.
I mean, I don't know about time. I think he thought it was. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point of taking her home if it's not to take her home to her mother?
Right.
When she should have been dead.
That's what I thought.
Alive now.
That's what I thought, because we go past the diner and the to-go stuff is gone. It's the old diner, not the new diner. And it's old. Everything looks older. I always thought it was.
I always thought it was the future. No. I always thought we were.
Well, so you can actually, if you wanted to, go back and track the cost of gasoline against those times, because they actually do show the price of gasoline at that Valero station. I've never done it, didn't really care, but technically I believe it's probably about the 2014-15 time frame.
Interesting. Yeah,
pretty cool. I mean, 18 won it. I mean, I thought 8 could have.
I thought 8 was going to get it.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't. I mean, 8. There was talk, should we pull? I'm like, no, it is part of the series. It is part of a collective. He calls them parts. I mean, so it is one long 18-hour.
It's like choosing your favorite chapter out of a novel, though.
Right.
It's really hard.
Yeah,
It's a hard thing to do.
And it is a masterpiece, and I think it's brilliantly. I mean, like it's something that you got to somehow see on the big screen if you can. It's just beautiful to see the light and just the whole beautiful scene. It's something else, but yeah, for me, it couldn't be number one.
I thought it was going to go all the way, and I told Bryon maybe to make it more suspenseful at the end, we should have to pick our favorite part of part 8 and rank that against each other.
Yeah.
Well, we can definitely talk about that. It's easy for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now let's say it. I would go with the atom bomb explosion. I think
Yeah, for sure.
just as a formal, visceral, visual experience, there's nothing like it.
Yep.
I'm with you. That would have been my choice, and especially the gold inside of that atomic. I've actually asked John to do a podcast on just that, like 8-second scene where we actually drill into the gold ball, and that's where the fireman lives, inside the gold ball. What?
Yeah, mine would have been the same thing. I have to imagine, Ben, you would have picked the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always forget there's anything else there. I forget. Wait a minute. There is a beginning with
Vito and the fireman. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
The frog moth.
Yeah, I know the whole thing, but right.
A lot
like
does
the little
happen.
girl that lived down the lane there. So,
But thank you, gentlemen. I mean, this is our. Listen, I'll be honest. We're gonna do one more madness before we end the podcast in the near future, and it will be bringing back everybody.
Nice.
And we're gonna do the 4 things. Now we have episode 18 versus the other 3, and we're gonna pick the ultimate Lynch thing. I don't know. We'll come up with a clever name, and we'll bring everybody back. So Josh will come back. Joel, John Thorne, Maya.
biggest madness ever.
Yeah.
So is it it's part 18, Lost Highway, episode 29 and episode 2?
Episode 2 and episode 22 of season 2.
Right, the finale.
Yeah.
And you're gonna pick the best of those. That's interesting.
I don't know. Should we do that? I mean, what do you guys think?
Why not?
I think the fun part of it would be that you'd have so many people. If it was just 4 of us doing it, it would go kind of fast and be like that. But if you have everybody in and they can all kind of voice their opinion and turn it into a conversation, I think in that one, the number of people makes up for the lack of options.
Right.
Everybody's going with Lost Highway. It's Lost Highway down.
We know what you're going with.
Man, I don't know how that was beaten, or that beat the straight story. I really don't.
It beat my, and I love Lost Highway, but I picked a different movie every single bracket, and it beat that movie.
I paid off Maya there. I paid her off.
Ben was paying off people with Bitcoin, I think. But thank you, gentlemen. Before we go, Josh, I know you've got a lot of stuff going on. You want to share with anything?
Just a couple things. So John Thorne and I started a podcast called the In Our House Now podcast, an inquiry into Twin Peaks: The Return. We have 6 episodes out. We actually just published one on Audrey yesterday. That is a 2-hour conversation where John has taken the 6 months that he's been writing this Audrey episode or article, and we've broken it out into a phenomenal conversation that really digs into all the areas of Audrey that you would ever want to think about, know about, and hopefully some that you hadn't thought about yet. I know I came away from that as like kind of enlightened. John's mind is amazing when it gets going. And then the other one is my book, Skeleton Key to Twin Peaks. I finally have a hardback version of it, so maybe a little hard to see, but 430 pages of scene-by-scene analysis from Twin Peaks: The Return. A few essays in there. Jeff Lemire wrote an introduction. If you like Jeff Lemire's graphic novels, he's also a huge Twin Peaks fan, and I've been blessed to come to know him through our podcast. So I have no idea when that's going to be available. I'm still copy editing, and it's so expensive, but it's all for charity. So I'm giving everything away to the David Lynch Foundation and the Krishnamurti Foundation to benefit both of the creators of Twin Peaks, Mark Frost and David Lynch. So that's what's going on with me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell everyone.
That is awesome, man. I'm so excited. I know I will definitely pre-order, and we'll definitely put it up on social media when that hits. Get the word out.
Yeah.
Mr. Joel Baca, what have you been up to? What's going on with your Patreon?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, too much stuff in June. April, May was very focused on Journey Through Twin Peaks, new video essays on season 3. I hit some of my goals. I still had a few chapters outstanding. And then I just kind of got diverted into so many different, I was doing the Patreon, I was starting a new Mad Men viewing diary. I just launched a public podcast, which is going to be sort of starting off, built off of all the stuff I've recorded for Patreon. And and I was started working again after a couple months of, quarantine. So everything got scattered, but I am still trying to get those 2 missing Journey chapters out. Hopefully at least one of them this month. That's going to be on the collaborators of the original series. So Harley Payton and Bob Engels, but also at least a little bit on all the directors. So for the past 6-7 months, I've had on my computer files for all of these movies that were directed by those Twin Peaks directors, like feature films that they made, so that I can do a little side-by-side, even if it's just for a few seconds. So all of these files are finally going to get utilized and put into play, and that's going to be interesting. It'll free up a lot of space on my drive, that's for sure. So hopefully that'll come this month. And yeah, the other big thing is finally just started to make my public podcast, Lost in the Movies. I've got the introductory episode out. It's just 8 minutes, me describing what the kind of mission of it's going to be. It's going to be based around usually a single film review. So it'll be a short podcast, which I think will be fun to play with, 15 to 30 minutes usually, just talking about one film. There'll be a little intro and outro. And that's for this year, that's going to be every couple weeks. And I'm going to start with the before films, before sunrise, before sunset, before midnight. People who are my patrons, when I released those episodes for them several years ago, they seem to enjoy those ones particularly. So I'm going to kick off the podcast with that, and then cover a lot of different Ethan Hawke films up through November, which is his 50th birthday. So I thought that would be kind of a fun way to kick it off. And I'll also be taking little asides here and there to do left-wing political cinema and also Twin Peaks cinema, where I talk about a film and dive into all of its connections to Twin Peaks. So there'll be little hints of that throughout the summer and fall. And then next year, I'm going to start to branch off the podcast into several different feeds of different podcasts, including those 2 topics, as well as a main one where I just cover a different film. At that point, it'll probably be week to week, but I'm starting off kind of slow, taking some of my material that's been behind a paywall for years and releasing little pieces of it. And if anybody likes that and they want to support it, in addition to going to iTunes, writing a rate and review so that it can actually start showing up. If you type it into Google, nothing comes up at this point. Like it doesn't even exist because it's so new and all of that. So if you like what I've recorded, if you've heard stuff in the past, give it a little like on there. And you can become a patron on patreon.com/LostInTheMovies, where I have my whole Lost in Twin Peaks rewatch, which is now up to episode, I'm actually probably today going to start preparing the episode 17 episode. So I'm more than halfway through the series at this point, going in depth on each episode.
Man,
Hey, Joel,
awesome.
Yeah.
Joel, will you review Born to Be Blue, the Ethan Hawke movie about Chet Baker, by any chance?
I actually did see that, and I don't see that many new movies these days. I mean, that's probably 4 or 5 years ago, but even in the past decade, it actually isn't one of the ones I reviewed, but I revisit that in the future.
Yeah,
for sure.
I want to put a request in, my friend.
Okay, I like it. I
would like to hear your thoughts on it.
Maybe 2021 we'll hear a little
Awesome.
a little Chet Baker. And actually, that was the theme song for my Patreon podcast.
That's right.
Because it's Let's Get Lost in the Movies, combined with Laura Palmer saying, let's get lost together to James. So I thought that was fun. The theme song for this one is from the Fassbinder sci-fi film World on Wires. I've just always loved that little kind of mellow, it's almost like a surf music thing from the 70s. So I used that as the intro. But yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Ben, well, this is our second to last madness. And that's we did a little video thing. Hope everybody enjoyed it on Facebook and YouTube.
Well,
and
don't forget Mark Frost madness. We have to do all of his books.
I have them all.
oh man, I don't know if I have time to read them all.
I've been doing that for the past year, literally the past year. Yes, and I've almost read all of them. But
wow,
it is a time commitment.
Oh God, that would be pretty cool. Maybe sometime in the future.
We'll give the madness to you, and you can put it up
Yeah,
on
I
your
have to
blog.
do it by myself.
I'm not choosing my favorite Mark Frost chapter.
But if you have a comment, a question, or theory about today's show, give us an email at twinpeaksunwrapped@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Twin Peaks Unwrapped, and like us on Facebook, Twin Peaks Unwrapped, and give us a 5-star review on iTunes or on Spotify, Google Play. Get a copy of our book at bluerosemag.com. Supplies are very limited. We have a merch table. All these notes will be in the show notes, but we have Twin Peaks Unwrapped face masks. So keep your face covered and in style. I mean, it's pretty cool. So T-Public is doing that for us, which is really nice. And with all that being said, we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you all. Be well.